Okay, guys, Milwaukee Paracon online 2020. We're into the home stretch of Saturday with this like our 10th presentation today, everybody. So those of you who've been hanging out all day, thank you so much for spending time in the Milwaukee Paracon 2020 online. I'm Mike from American Ghost Walks. We're the sponsor, Haunted History Tours. The conference director, is an awesome haunted history tour guide in Milwaukee, and we're just big supporters of all of this kind of stuff because we love it ourselves. And so I'm really excited to hear from the next presenter because I am totes jealous of him. He studied at the Kessler Parapsychology Institute, and I tell you, that's my backup plan. If this music and ghost tour thing doesn't work out, I'm going back to college because I want to be a parapsychologist.
Go for it. It's a great time.
And so that's that he has done it. And also the scientific research, I mean, really coming at this from a scientific perspective is something that we need more of. And that's why we appreciate guys like our next presenter, Brandon Massullo, who wrote an awesome book called The Ghost Studies. You can find that link at the sticky at the top of the chat. And let's jump into the science of ghosts. I'm getting out of here because nobody wants to hear me talk anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. And it's great to be here. I watched a lot of the presentations before me. A lot of interesting things. So many interesting things. So hopefully I don't mess this up. I'm going to try to pull the slides up as I go here. And we'll see if it works. Okay, looks like it's working. So what we're going to talk about today is the science of ghosts. And before we get into who I am, anytime you bring up ghosts, one of the things you always bring up is the survival hypothesis. And basically what the survival hypothesis is this idea that some part of us, whether that's consciousness, our soul, our spirit, whatever, continues to exist after we die. So it's this idea that our personality, our memories, our experiences go on after we pass on. Now, a lot of mainstream academia, neuropsychology, kind of paints humans as robots. And this idea that we're sort of like TVs and that our emotions, our memories, and our personality is just the result of circuitry. And that once the TV stops working, then nothing goes on. It's just blank. And that's, that's a lot to take in. But again, there's two sides to this. So anytime you bring up ghosts, what you're talking about is the survival hypothesis, this idea that something is happening after we go on. Now, as we move forward with this, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Mike gave me a good introduction. I'm a therapist, I'm an author, I'm a parapsychologist, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. I have some graduate degrees in psychological research methods with a specialization in parapsychology, and then a degree in clinical counseling as well. My research has been in environmental sensitivity and paranormal experiences. I was part of, there was a lot of co-authors on this article in the Frontiers of Psychology, but things that go bump in the literature and environmental appraisal of haunted houses, which is a great read if you're into ghost hunting or anything along those lines. Gestalt influences pertinent to studies of haunted houses. Another great read if you're a ghost hunter, paranormal investigator, just about the environmental issues around haunted houses. And then my book is The Ghost Studies, which is right here. And that's a couple of hypotheses I have on what's going on with ghostly encounters. All right. So now that we got that out of the way, the boring stuff, let's go ahead and get into what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to go over sort of how science has approached ghostly phenomenon in the past 100 years or so. And it's a very brief, fun, interactive presentation. I'm not going to go very in depth with 30 minutes. I don't really have time to do that. But some fun questions. Can we weigh the human soul? Can we talk to the dead? Can we create apparitions? Are some people more prone to ghostly encounters? And we're going to look at how science has tried to answer some of these questions. I keep hitting that button and I know it doesn't work. All right. So what we're going to do is, I think it's only fitting to start off with a ghostly encounter. Now, there's millions of these baffling encounters that happen each year all over the world among individuals from all walks of life. With so many ghostly encounters, there's really few answers. And I think that it's no mystery that science has sort of dropped the ball when it comes to this. And when I say this, I mean explaining ghostly encounters. Often these amazing encounters are explained away by science as hallucinations, misinterpretations, overactive imaginations, and individuals who have these encounters are sort of left to get answers from reality television shows, and that's tough to do. We all have seen the ghost shows. Some of them are really good, some of them are really bad, but it's not really a good place to go when you're feeling overwhelmed with having ghostly encounters or paranormal experiences, because it's just entertainment, right? So let's get to the first one here. This is from Chris Woodward. She has a series out called Haunted Ohio. I read it when I was in high school, and it influenced me a great deal. But this one here is about the first night at Fort Magruder in Williamsburg, Virginia. And she says, "I woke up with the feeling you get when someone is standing behind you. Uneasily, I rolled over, only be confronted by a ghastly sight. A young Civil War soldier standing by the bed, staring at me. He was very young, no more than 15 or 16, and wore light-colored, brownish gray clothing. Half of his face had been shot away. I could hardly bear to look at him. He was so utterly miserable. 'Go away, please,' I pleaded with him. 'Go to the light, please, just go to the light.' He returned for 2 more nights, never saying anything, never moving from that rigid corpse-like position." Here's another example of a haunting experience or a ghostly encounter. My father passed away in the hospital quietly around 3 p.m. that day. We had a very special relationship, and I definitely considered myself a daddy's girl. His passing was a shock to the whole family. Overwhelmed with sadness, worry, and fear, I'd laid down on the couch as soon as I got home that evening. It must have been around 8 p.m. when my encounter occurred. While laying on the couch, an overwhelming sense of comfort overcame me. As I sat up, I saw an image of my father. I wasn't scared, just shocked. He walked towards me and whispered, "Don't be sad." He then rubbed my shoulders, which is what he would do to ease my sadness when I was a teenager. The encounter made me smile, even though it only lasted seconds, and then he slowly faded away. So what's interesting here is we have one experience which is extremely terrifying, which is the Civil War ghost, and then another which is comforting and meaningful. Now, they're both ghostly encounters. So, getting into the paranormal or parapsychology, I often asked myself when reading this when I was younger was, what are ghosts? What causes ghosts? Why is this house haunted? Why is the other one not haunted? And this began my fascination. And what I found was, the more I got into grad school and the University of Edinburgh was, the paranormal is such a difficult area to study. You can't study it in a logical, scientific way, because paranormal experiences are generally erratic, episodic, poorly documented, random, not repeatable on demand. And this is basically everything the scientific method hates. So studying this is a challenging thing. So any academics or anybody, whether it's skeptics or believers or whatever, anyone who goes into this field understands it's going to be a challenging thing to do. Right? So what I want to do is keep an open mind as we go through this presentation. Maybe there's some people in here that are skeptical of paranormal phenomenon and believe it's sort of the result of fraud or attention-seeking behaviors, even mental illness. But my role here is not to sort of convince people that paranormal phenomenon exists, but just to sort of acknowledge that millions of people each year report ghostly phenomenon. And keeping an open mind regarding those who report the phenomenon helps us better understand it. Nobody can dispute that people report apparitions. So instead of arguing whether these experiences are ghosts, maybe it's good just to focus on the actual phenomenon. So do you believe in ghosts, or do you exist? Maybe aren't the question, or do ghosts exist, aren't the questions we really want to ask, but instead, do you believe that people experience apparitions? And you start from there, and then you work your way towards the other side of it. So, button again. All right. So here's just some brief statistics on ghosts. Not much here. We've all seen these in most presentations and slides. A lot of people believe in ghosts. The one thing that I found interesting was between 1996 and 2006, the number of Americans who reported seeing dead people doubled over that decade. I don't know what it is now. I couldn't find any up-to-date statistics, but we're seeing an increase, even with an increase in technology and science and all this. We're seeing more haunt-type experiences going on. Right? So who studies paranormal phenomenon? And that's the next thing we're going to talk about here. Oh, I'm sorry. How long has science been studying ghosts? For this, we can go back all the way to AD 100 and Pliny the Younger, and he documented a lot of haunt-type phenomenon. In 1612, there was a chemist and physicist, Robert Boyle, who was actually the first scientist to start really taking it seriously and going into people's homes and chronicling things. 1882 is really when it really started, and that's when the Society for Psychical Research was created, and they started carrying out formal scientific research. And the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research, really had a lot of prominent scientists on it, including a prime minister. And spiritualism was at its heyday, and the science community was going out and going to these seances and testing psychics and really getting their hands dirty to help the public better understand what was happening, whether it was fraud or genuine. So the SPR is sort of the birth of science actually beginning to study this. So who studies the paranormal today? Google Scholar is a great place to start if you ever want to look at like academic journals on ghosts or anything. So you go to Google Scholar, you type in what you're looking for. So hauntings, you type it in. 866 scientific articles referencing hauntings, about over 2,300 referencing paranormal, and about 2,500 referencing apparitions. Parapsychology is usually the field that's most noted for doing this. And parapsychology is the study of psi phenomenon or psychic phenomenon. So telepathy, precognition, clairvoyance, psychosis, near-death experiences, reincarnation, apparitional experiences. These are all under parapsychology's wing. Now, parapsychology is a subset of psychology. So at the very top, you have psychology. And then below that, you have sort of branches of psychology. So you have neuropsychology, clinical psychology, social psychology, health psychology, and then parapsychology is up there as well. Now, a lot of universities, prominent universities like the University of Edinburgh, do study paranormal phenomenon. And the University of Edinburgh is a top 25 university in the world. So it's a pretty prominent academic institution. Now, who actually studies it? University of Virginia has a division of perceptual studies. They have a whole department related to basically reincarnation is what they focus on. IONS in California, Institute of Noetic Sciences, that was founded by former astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and he in IONS right now does a lot of precognition and things on that. And then the SPR and the Parapsychological Association as well. All right. So let's get into our actual questions now that we know a little bit about it. And this is a kind of a fun question. I came across this sort of by accident, but the question would be, can you weigh the human soul? And if anyone wants to put in there what they think the human soul weighs, just let me know. But someone actually did conduct experiments on this, and his name was Dr. Duncan McDougall. And in 1907, he published an article in the American Medical Academic Journal and the New York Times. And what he did was he believed that the soul had a substance, or has substance and takes up space. And if it takes up space, it must have weight. So what he did was he placed 6 dying patients on a specially constructed bed with measurements, and concluded that at the moment of death there was a loss of weight. And the loss of weight, yep, Janine got it. The loss of weight was actually 21 grams. All right. So what he found was that, according to him, at the moment of death, the body lost 21 grams. And then he believed that this sudden and unexplained loss of weight at death was quantifiable proof of a human soul escaping at death. Right? I don't know. It was a movie. I see that in the chat room. It wasn't a very good movie from what I heard. But this is his results were very inconsistent. I think only one of the 6 people he actually measured showed a loss of weight. Some were up, some were down, some lost weight, then gained it back. There was a lot of conjecture about how do you know the exact moment of death. There were several other issues with the experiments. The physicians pointed out other reasons you might lose weight at death. And he also did this stupid thing. And I don't know, we still hear this myth today, that this idea that animals don't have souls. And I don't know if anyone ever actually looked at where that started, but it started with this guy here. So he did these experiments with dogs too, and he found that when at the moment of death with dogs, there was no weight loss. So he concluded that that means that dogs don't have souls. So that myth has kind of been around, or animals don't have souls, for a long, long time. And I think it started in 1907 with this guy. So we didn't do well as far as weighing the soul. So the next thing we're going to go to is, can we talk to the dead? Right. This has been going on for a long period of time with psychics and mediums and Ouija boards and EVPs, and I guess I can go on and on and on. I guess flashlights. You know, are we talking to the dead? The idea has been flown around for quite a while. One of the most famous people to actually tackle this was Thomas Edison. Now, I say tackle, he actually didn't tackle it. He started writing about this idea of a telephone to the dead, or a device that can communicate with the dead. He never created it. However, he did conduct some experiments. And one of the things he had was called a spirit finder. And this article here it's available through the Literary Digest in 1921. You could read it. It's basically, he developed this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's a device with a beam of light coming from a lamp, which he thought could detect small particles in the air. And his theory was that if ghosts exist, they would consist of some particles. And if this machine, in theory, should be able to detect these particles. So, I mean, he had one of his lab assistants stay in a haunted location all night, just staring at a beam of light. We all know probably how that ended. Nothing really came about. But he got a whole article in the Literary Digest, and you know, I guess, I don't know if it was a marketing thing for him, like the telephone to the dead was a marketing thing. I'm not sure, or if he was really serious about it or not. It's hard to really tell looking back at it 100 years out. But if we keep going, we actually see something that's more modern day. And I don't know how many people have ever actually heard of the soul phone. If you have, let me know in the comments. And this is straight from their website, so I didn't want to rip anything off. But it's a combination of technologies being developed by Dr. Schwartz at the University of Arizona. The purpose of this technology is, the program is to develop working prototypes of accurate technologies for communicating with, I love this word here, post-material persons. So I guess that's ghosts. It has been demonstrated that at least some of them want to continue relationships and help us advance. So here we have the cell phone, or soul phone, sorry, not cell phone. And when we think about someone developing a device to communicate with the dead, we kind of have this picture of a guy in a garage with a lab coat and hair sitting out like this, and, you know, hasn't slept in a week or anything like that, that neighbors talk about, right? But that's not really the case here. Dr. Schwartz is a professor of psychology, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona. He's received PhD in psychology from Harvard. He taught at Yale. He has quite a legitimate background, and he's really looking into communicating with the dead. And Soul Phone really says that they've done it. They've actually, before the pandemic hit, started having demonstrations for the public. And I was going to go to one of these, but they shut them down. So I'm really fascinated with this, and you can follow Soul Phone on Facebook and social media, donate to it. To me, it's a very intriguing project, to say the least. Now, I don't really have time to go into kind of what he's doing with it. They haven't released what they're doing with it. I have ideas about how they're doing it. But if you're ever interested, you could always check out Dr. Gary Schwartz's books, YouTube. He's a very good speaker and writer. I've read a couple of his books, and it's really good. But basically, he determined that spirits could sort of manipulate light or create light in dark areas, and he used photomultipliers to detect small amounts of light. It's kind of a complicated process, but if you're ever interested, just go ahead and read it. And what's interesting, and these are pretty extraordinary claims, but they feel like they can develop a soul switch, which is a yes/no to the spirits, a soul keyboard, so spirits can talk to them via keyboard, a soul voice, so you could hear the spirit, and a soul video where you can actually see them. And these are all the things that came straight from their website, so this is not me making anything up. So these are pretty extraordinary claims for the soul phone. And like I said before, I'm really interested in it. I'm fascinated with this project, and unfortunately it hasn't really got too much traction on social media. So and here we go to the next thing. Can we create apparitions? The short answer to that is yes. There's a thing called the psychomantium, and if you heard of the psychomantium, let me know over there on the side. But it's basically mirror gazing or scrying. It was used by the ancient Greek oracles to contact the dead. So if those who wanted to consult with the deceased would gaze into these reflective surfaces, and their surroundings would sort of slip away, and they'd enter an altered state of consciousness. And then there was this sort of mystical conduit to the other world, supposedly. Now, the picture on the right is actually the Oracle of Delphi, which it was an important ancient Greek religious sanctuary. So leaders would go up there to consult with the oracle through a mirror scrying or mirror gazing and these types of things. So it was a very everyone would go up there. It was a religious sanctuary type place, right? Today it has different connotations, scrying. I don't know, I see Black Mirror over there, mirror gazing, all these different things with it. Now, Raymond Moody is the guy who brought psychomantium into the modern day, and Dr. Moody wanted to find a way to experience apparitions in a controlled environment, and he used elements from the ancient practice to create a modern day psychomantium. So here he is here. He's a philosopher, psychologist, and physician. He's known for, he coined the term near-death experiences. I'm sure you've read a couple of books if you're into near-death experiences. He's got a PhD and an MD as well. But I'll touch very briefly. If no one's ever seen a psychomantium, I actually created one in my house in my spare bedroom. My wife did not appreciate that, but it happened. But basically, all you have to do is black out all the light that's coming into your room. And then you put up a mirror about 4 feet from the ground, so it's facing up. And then you get a chair and you put it right in front of the mirror. Now, you're not staring directly in the mirror. The mirror is up here, so you're staring up at it, so you don't see your reflection. You put a small amount of light in the room, like a candle amount of light. And then there's some steps you do before you go into the psychomantium. But basically what you're doing is meditating, thinking about who you want to contact. And then you kind of just sit back and stare in the mirror. And then, magic happens is kind of how you want to say that. So it's not a complicated process. The typical experience the mirror becomes fuzzy and cloudy, and then a figure actually arises, an apparition, and it's very vivid. Dr. Moody had 300 participants, all of which, most of them reported an experience. So 50% had conversations with the deceased, 10% believe the apparition came out of the mirror, which that don't freak you out. I don't know what will. 25% had the apparition after leaving the psychomantium. So after they left the room, this thing popped out in front of them. And a couple of them actually believed that they entered the mirror into a different world. So this is some pretty intense stuff for just staring at a mirror, right? And I'll give you some examples here in a second. And this is direct, I think, from Moody's book. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, it seemed like these 3 people stepped right into the room around me. It looked as if they stepped out of the mirror, but I felt that such a thing couldn't be, so I was shocked. I didn't know what was going on. For a moment, I thought I was someone trying to play a joke on me. So I reached up quickly to touch them, and when I did, my hand hit the curtain. I saw them. I still saw them. I got to look at all 3. My sister Jill was there. My 2 others also, my friend Todd, my grandfather, all of them look very much alive. And here's another one. This is an example of a woman who saw, spoke with, and touched her deceased grandfather in the psychomantium. I was so happy to see him that I began to cry. Through the tears, I could see him in the mirror. Then he seemed to get closer, and he must have come out of the mirror because next thing I knew, he was right next to me, holding me and hugging me. It felt like he said something like, "It's okay, don't cry." So the question is, are these visual encounters in the psychomantium proof of life after death? There are some cases where they get information that they didn't know, which sort of correlates to maybe this is, but perhaps they're just projections from our subconscious as well. Our unconscious way of processing grief. There's different other things that we could look at as natural explanations of this. Obviously, if you're in a room with reduced stimuli and you're staring at a mirror and there's suggestion, your mind can play all kinds of tricks on you. All right. So I'm going to move fast here. I got about 5 minutes. The last part is, are some people more prone to ghostly encounters? This is the thing that I've been fascinated with and what's my research in Edinburgh was on. There's actually a subset of the population that we'll talk about in a second. But let's say that paranormal information is similar to radio waves. All right. So if you're walking around the city, why is reception better in one area as opposed to another area? Some of us remember adjusting the rabbit ears on our TVs when we were younger. Why is one configuration better than another configuration? So what makes this configuration best? So I encourage others to ask questions like this. What makes this location special? Why are paranormal phenomenon happening in this location? Why are certain people having experiences and other none? What makes this witness unique? They aren't having experiences at work or at McDonald's, so why are they having them here and now? So these are all important questions as we go on and ask, or as we go on and research this phenomenon. One of the things I found was that there's a thing called environmental sensitivity, and there's some individuals who are actually more prone to ghostly experiences, but it has nothing to do with psychic or sensitivity in that terms. It has more to do with someone's ability to taste, touch, and smell, right? So there's a certain part of the population that just is better at identifying environmental stimuli. So we're all affected and react to the environment in different ways. Certain people, more than others, that's for sure. But certain people are overwhelmed with environmental stimuli, and it causes reactions to them. Illnesses, conditions, long-standing allergies, chronic pain, fatigue, migraine, sensitivity to light, sounds, and smells. So if I walk into a room and there's neon lights above me, or whatever those lights are called, the guy next to me has a bottle of Old Spice on, and I'm sitting on a chair that's just been cleaned with bleach, I'm perfectly fine. I'm content. Another person walks in that same environment, they get headaches from the lights above, the cologne makes them nauseous, and they get a huge rash from the bleach on the chair. So we're essentially in the same place, but we're experiencing the world completely different. Their environment is almost attacking their bodies. They're really sensitive to it. Me, doesn't bother me at all. So these people who are really sensitive have way more paranormal experiences than the normal population. And what I found was that, when I did my research, I found that those who are environmentally sensitive, I have a questionnaire that kind of determines if you're environmentally sensitive or not. 55% of the environmentally sensitive people had a past paranormal experience, whereas non-sensitives, only 26 had a past paranormal experience, which is a big thing. The next thing I did was I did research at Mary King's Close, which has been on all the haunted shows. It's basically an underground city in Edinburgh where they supposedly walled up the plague victims down there. It was basically where lower class lived when it was overpopulated in Edinburgh. But what I did was there was 300 participants. They walked. When they came into the location, I gave them a questionnaire. It determined if they were environmentally sensitive or not. Then I gave them a little checklist, and they walked around the location, and they would check off if they had an experience. So of 300 people, guess how many people had experiences? It was actually, I had 601 experiences out of 300 people. So people were having multiple experiences in this location. And what I found was sensitives were having significantly more experiences than non-sensitives, almost 3 times as much, right? So this tells us one thing. If we can categorize who's more likely to have paranormal experiences, it gives us a better idea of who to focus on to get more information about what's going on. Now, the question always becomes, are these environmentally sensitive people who are having way more experiences, are they picking up something that the general population is not? Are they misinterpreting things that are going on in the environment? Whatever it is, it could be that perhaps they're just they have a refined ability to fix on stimuli that other people it never really registers with. So perhaps people are sensitive to magnetic fields in the environment. They can pick up on those signals in the local magnetic field, which sort of allows them to experience the environment's past, its atmosphere, or its prior occupants. Bacteria is known to leave behind measurable energetic traces. And it was often thought, well, are people capable of doing that too? And if they are able to do that, obviously this population would pick it up more than the normal population. So as I close up here, one of the things is the results of my study, sensitives reported significantly more past paranormal experiences than non-sensitives, and they reported significantly more haunt-type experiences in a haunted location than non-sensitives. So this gives us a better idea of not only are they having them in the past, but they're having them in an active location as well. So as we move forward, the last slide would be why. It could be that they're picking up on things that or noticing things that non-sensitives can't. But the question is, what are they picking up on? And if you want to know more about that, that's another presentation, unfortunately. You could also check out the book, The Ghost Studies. I have my hypotheses on that. Michael Jauer is a researcher who does a lot on environmental sensitivity, Jawer. He has a book called The Spiritual Anatomy of Emotions. It's like this thick. It is probably one of the best reads you can have if you're interested in paranormal phenomenon. And he also has a new book called The Sensitive Soul, which goes over this as well. But he's a big proponent of environmental sensitivity. And then last here, I'll move on. How do you find me? You can go to my website, hauntedtheories.com. Facebook is @hauntedtheories. Twitter is @hauntedtheories. And you could also buy the book. The book is available on Amazon. It's on Audible if you like listening to books, Kindle, all those good things as well. All right. So it looks like I'm right at 6 o'clock, hopefully. I'm not sure if I'm able to take questions or not, but I don't see any over here. If somebody has a question, just let me know. I can answer it real quick, or you can just email it to me and we'll kind of go from there. Whoops, I see things moving. Okay.
Minutes here. And so, yeah, jump in. And if you have something in particular to ask a parapsychologist, this would be the time. Most of the time when you're talking to a parapsychologist, it's just somebody who put that on their card because they liked Ghostbusters.
Well, you can see I like Ghostbusters too.
Right. No, we're all big fans.
Okay.
We're all big fans. I got a Xena deck over there, but I don't tell people I'm a parapsychologist. And so if you guys have any questions, throw them out. Otherwise, we're getting ready for the next segment in 10 minutes. So make sure in the chat. So on the top of the chat, there's a link to Brandon's book, The Ghost Studies. I have it. I love it. It's a fantastic value for what you're going to get. So I would recommend that. And then, Michael, have you encountered non-material entities that don't seem to be human?
Is that ghosts? Non-material entities that aren't human. I'm guessing that's ghosts.
Yeah.
That's a pretty extensive. I personally have never seen an apparition. I'll keep it real short. I've never seen.
Yeah, never seen. He's like, never seen. All right, he hasn't seen a Class 5 free roaming vapor.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I'm still not fascinating, and I go out and I try to talk to people who have had them.
Do medications affect sensitives? Like allergy medications or things that are mentioned, it's supposed to deaden the senses?
I don't know. That's actually a great question. I think you're sensitive no matter what you take. So I think the medicines maybe just sort of help you with the symptoms of it. It doesn't really help with the actual environmental sensitivity. There's a lot of research on environmental sensitivity. I think a lot of people like this because if you have migraines, if you have fibromyalgia, if you have other chronic fatigue syndromes, you're usually environmentally sensitive. And I found that when I do a lot of talks, people really have a lot of questions about that. But it's out there on the internet. There's a lot of research on that. How many universities have parapsychology degrees? In the United States, not many. Usually what people do is they'll get an independent study in psychology and then have a specialization in parapsychology. If you really want to study parapsychology, you have to go overseas to do that. You can go to the University of Virginia. They have some sort of consciousness-based research. I don't think they actually term it parapsychology, though.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I always say if someone wants to get into parapsychology, I always recommend you get a degree in something you can get a career in, like clinical psychology, and then you do your research on the side.
Because also they did have the Rhine Institute at Duke, and that's more about the ESP and side is like a lot of the research they do, But there was a place called JFK University that used to have a degree in higher consciousness studies.
Okay, yep.
But they closed down, and that broke my heart.
Yeah, universities tend to stay away from the word parapsychology. At least they used to. They term it other things.
So once again, we want to thank Brandon for his time and joining us today. Everybody, make sure you check out his book, The Ghost Studies. And this is like the 11th talk we've had today in the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference Online 2020. So everybody who's been joining us and hanging out, thank you so much. Thank you again, Brandon. And we'll see you in the final presentation today. What you think is weird is weirder than you think, with John Tenney. And so we'll see you guys inside there in just about 10 minutes.